Okay, let's get started with creating our art gallery. I hope you've had a good go yourself, and regardless of whether you've managed to get it looking just like this or you've been a bit creative and you've got the important parts down, either way, really well done for having a go at it and getting practical with the exercise. So right now what I've got is this. So it's not looking all that much like this, but we'll get there one step at a time. I'm going to, for the purposes of this site, I'm just going to go from the top down. So first of all, I'm going to get this thing with John's art going, the header, then I'm going to get this part going, then I'm going to do the images, and then I'm going to get these little blocks at the end. So let's get started with the title. And to make things easier, I'm going to move that over here and have my code over here. Okay, fantastic. So right now all I have is H1 John's painting. So first of all, actually, I'm just going to get a nice background color going. So I'm going to use my ColorZilla to get this color value. Okay, let's go for this one. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go into my CSS file and just put the background color for the body. So body. And I'm going to put this for the background color. Okay, and put a semicolon at the end so it's all looking nice. Okie dokie. So then when I refresh this, it's not, there we go, perfect. So the next thing I want to do is I want to give it a border, and I also want to move it to center. So because this is going to be the only H1 that we're going to be using, I'm just going to put this, I don't need to create a class or an ID or anything, I can just style the H1. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to center. So that's going to be text align center. Let's just make sure I'm spelling that right. There we go. Okay, and then we're going to have a border. So for this, let's go for, it looks like quite a thick border, so let's go for 3px, blue, solid, and then blue for the color. Okay, let's have a look. Fantastic. We can even go make this probably double the size. Let's see how that looks. Okay. Well, I mean that's quite a big border. So let's go for 9 and then we'll leave it at that. It doesn't need to be exactly the same. Great, that looks fine. So the next thing we want to do is work out how we can make the borders rounded like this. That's not something we've gone over before. So we're going to have to do a little bit of research. So I'm going to go into my search engine and put CSS how to round board. I'm going to, instead of corners, I'm going to do round borders. How to round border CSS. That looks good. So our friend W3 Schools has come up well again. Okay, so it's talking about something called border radius here. With this property, you can give any element rounded corners. Okay, yep, this is looking exactly like what we want. So let's have a look. Border radius 25 pixels. Okay, so it shows that we can do different curve amounts, but we just want it all to be the same. So okay, let's have a go at that. So as I just showed you at the top here, it was saying border radius as a property. So let's just try any random pixel value for now and just see how it looks. So here we go, border radius, and let's go for 10px. Okay, let's have a look at that. Brilliant. So as you can see, it's now got some rounded corners, and that looks good enough to me in terms of the size and then the rounding. So I'm happy to move to the next part here. So next of all here we have what looks like a H3 saying welcome to my painting. So I'm just going to add that in to my paintings, and then I'm also going to add in a paragraph here saying these are my lovely paintings. Not really. I downloaded them off. Let's make this look a bit better. The internet. Okay, cool. So now what we want to do, it looks like we want to move that into the middle. So let's put all of this in a div. Now, this isn't going to look exactly how this looks, but I think this is going to look, it's going to work well. So we've got a div, so we're going to put all this into a div. There we go. And next up, we just need to put the h3 in here as well. Can't forget that. And we're just going to give this a class name of welcome message. So there are a few things that we want to do here. First of all, we want to move it to the middle. Let's define our class first. So to define a class, we use the dot, and then we use the name, which I believe we had as welcome message. So let's then style this. So we want to have the text align in the middle, center, and let's go for a different font family as well. Let's go for sans serif. Okay, and we'll go for a background color. And you might as well use the Google Color Picker, because I don't always want to be relying on the ColorZilla, because I know some of you may not be using that. So here we go. We just put this in. Let's go for a nice light color. Save that. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that's looking better. Now, I'd actually like to have a bit more space, both in the top and the bottom, so that there's more color between sort of the words and what's above and what's below. So I'm going to add in some padding. So for this, we have the padding as normal for all of them. So I could say 20px, and then that'll give us padding on every single side, like that. We could just have the padding on the top. Have a look at that. So then it doesn't go down at the bottom as well. So I'm going to go for that. That looks fine. It doesn't look exactly the same as this. However, I think it's good enough for our purposes. Or actually, let's go for it at the bottom. So that at least looks more similar. That's good. And let's give a little bit of padding on the top. Let's go for 5 pixels. Okay. Fantastic. I'm happy with that. So now let's go on to the big thing, which is getting our images into a nice div. So, into a nice box, I should say. I just gave away what we're going to do next. We're going to create a div. We want all this to be in this box with a border. Best thing to do is to use a div. So for this, I'm going to create another class. I'm going to call this paintings. Maybe paintings. I'll just leave it as paintings. And then we're going to put inside all of our different images. So instead of me spending time going and getting some paintings off the internet, I'm just going to use some standard images that we've used in previous lectures. But of course, it'd be nice if you went and got some paintings for your own, so looked all good. So let's see, I'm going to put in 4 images. Now here's the fun part. Let's see if I can remember the names of some of our images that we've used before. So we used a picture of a polar bear, which I believe we called P-Bear. We used a picture of a chicken, I think. So I think it was called chicken. I think we used Lord of the Rings, so maybe rings.jpg. And finally, I believe we used one called css.jpg. Okay, let's see how many of those are correct. 1, 2, 3. So we just got one wrong. Let's have a look at which one. Ah, Lord. That's what we did. It wasn't rings, it was Lord. Fantastic. Now, as you can see, we have a bit of a problem here. They are very big, and they're all below each other. So they're in our div, so we don't have to worry too much about that. But first of all, let's start off by making our images smaller. These are the only images we're going to be using, so I don't need to create a class or anything like that. I can just directly style the image element. So I'm just going to go for a width of, let's go for 30%. See how that looks. Fantastic, that's looking better. And if I make this full screen, okay, so let's make it a bit smaller. Okay. Let's make it, I don't know, 18%. Give that a try. Fantastic. Okie dokie. So the next thing we want to do is maybe have, let's see, let's have a border. 3px, orange, solid orange. Okay. So that's around the images, of course, so we actually want to put it in the div. So let's take it out of the image, and let's create our class for the div, which I believe we called, let's have a look, paintings. Okay, so we define it as a class by using the dot, and then we're just going to put in paintings here. Okay, then that should change the borders from being around the images to around the whole thing. Okay, fantastic. And now I'd like to see a bit of space between this div here and this div here. So you might remember we used padding before when we wanted to have space within the div, but outside the div, instead of using padding, can you remember what we use? It's called margin. So I'm going to use 30 pixels for that. As you can see, hopefully what's going to happen is these two divs are going to be a bit further apart. Fantastic. Now it's also further apart from the left and the right, which actually looks quite good. If I didn't want that, then I could just put margin dash top. So that it only separates from the top, like this, which is fine, but I actually quite like the look of it when it's moved in a bit from the sides as well. So I'm just going to have the whole margin as 30 pixels. Okay, so that's looking good. So the next thing down we want to do is we want to have a little div here, and it looks like it's spaced a little bit away from the side. It's a certain size box or rectangle, so let's get stuck in with that. Obviously what we're going to be wanting to do is create a div, because that's that's almost definitely what's being used here. Like the div is the container. So the class, I'm just going to mix it up and use this as an ID instead of a class. I mean, all of these could be used as IDs. Just for ease, I've been using them as classes. So let's have a look. I'm going to use this ID as description. Now inside of this div, I'm going to put a paragraph just saying all paintings were created with power of creativity. Oops, getting a bit excited there. Creativity, there we go. Okie dokie. Let's take a look. Okay, so that looks kind of okay. It doesn't have a background color. It's it's not looking how we want just yet. So let's have a go at changing that. Let's first of all style our ID. So it's not a class, it's an ID. So what we're going to do is, if I just change my keyboard to UK, there we go, that's better. Okay, so it's called description. So I'm going to use the hash to say that it's an ID. And I'm going to use description, and I'm going to style it. Let's start by just giving it a background color of blue. Okay, fantastic. Looking good, looking good. So let's see, let's now make sure that it actually comes out from the side. So we want it to be away from the left hand side. Now, we could either use margin left, which we were just using margin before to move it, or we could do like we used before, use positioning. So position, do you remember which one we need to use? So it's relative. And then we want to be, let's say, 25 pixels from the left hand side. So I'm just going to put left 25 px. Okay. Great. So now we've moved it in a little bit. Next thing we want to do is have it looking a bit more like a square. So that's where height and width come into play. So let's define the height as being 60 pixels, and let's have the width as 80. Okay. Okay, that's kind of good. It's a bit too small, so let's go for 300 in height, and let's go for 500 in width. That should be a bit better. Okay, great. We could even do with making it a bit smaller. Fantastic. Okay, so as you can see, there's actually a bit more space on the top of this one. So if you haven't already, pause the video here and just have a quick think as to how you think we can get some space in the top here. So the paragraph can have a bit of space from the div in the top area. So if you've had a good think, don't worry if you didn't get it. It's not the easiest one. But what we can do here is essentially, if we haven't styled a paragraph yet, so let's actually give this an ID anyway. ID equals description text. Okay. And then let's style this description text. And now for that paragraph, we're going to give it a padding on the top of 30 px. As you can see, that's giving us a bit of padding there. Let's double that. Fantastic. So that's just given us a bit of padding, which looks nice. Okay, fantastic. So the last two things to go for, we just want to get this copyright in the bottom left, and I'll visit the shop. So let's get started with our copyright. Right at the bottom here, let's have another div. This class is going to be called copyright. And we'll create a paragraph just saying copyright me 2019. Okay, so now we want to style this class. So we go to our CSS file and let's just put it in here. Use a dot to define that it's going to be a class. Then copyright. Okay, fantastic. So now we want it to be at the bottom of the page, but just a little bit higher. So the first thing we need to think of is we need to use positioning in order to put this in the place that we want. And we're going to use relative. And then we're just going to say we want it to be, let's say 10 pixels from the bottom. So we're going to put bottom, and 10 pixels. And let's give a background color of yellow. And let's see how that looks now. Okay, fantastic. I should do maybe just 5 pixels. And we don't want it to be running along the whole bottom line. So let's just say width of 50 pixels. Maybe a bit longer actually. Let's go for 100 so that it actually fits the text in. A little bit more. Okay, that looks a lot better. And now finally, to finish it off, we want to have bottom right a link to our shop. So we're going to create one final div. And we're going to call this shop. And then we're going to put in a link. That doesn't have to lead anywhere for now. We're just going to leave it blank. But we're going to put some text saying click to shop. Okay. Make sure that's looking okay. Where is it? It's gone down here. But we want it to go to the bottom right. So what we will do is we will take that class called shop and we'll style it. So use the dot to define that it's a class and then shop. Background color. Let's go for red. And we want it to be, so we want it to stay, even if we were to scroll, we want it to stay at the bottom right, let's say. So let's put the position as absolute. Oh, sorry, it's fixed. Perfect. And then let's put in, again, so we want it to be from the bottom. So let's say 10 pixels, and in from the right a little bit, 20 pixels. There we go. Perfect. So if we were to have to scroll, let's say, for example, let's take away the styling of our images so that they're still large, which is at the bottom here. Let's just remove this styling so that we have to scroll on our page. Now, as you can see, our click to shop is staying bottom right because we've used the position of fixed. Let's just revert to that. Okay, fantastic. So in this lecture, we've been able to basically create the Basic Paintings website. So I hope you've had a go at this yourself and you're feeling confident. The main things that we've been integrating here is the use of divs quite a lot using classes and IDs, and also using positioning. So if you're not completely sure, I recommend you have another go at this and just try and play around, especially with using position and padding and margin. It takes a long time to really get used to this stuff, but the best way to solidify your learning is to just be creative. Keep trying to just play around with it, see what you can do, see what you can't do, and play around with it like that. So have a go, have a play, and I'll see you in the next lecture.